Hello.
Hello. Hi,
Hi,
Amy.
Ray.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to have you on this call today.
Oh, good. I'm excited too.
Okay, well, we'll just get started. So I know we're both very busy women. Hi, everyone. This is Ray Luskin of The Creative Activist and The Winning Adventure. And with me today is my guest, Amy Quale. And she is the founder and chief publishing officer of Wise Inc. Creative Publishing out of Minnesota, Minneapolis. And Amy has a background in publishing, production, editing, and writing. She has worked with over 250 authors, including myself, since 2007. She founded Wise Inc.'s blog in 2012, which is a leading voice for the indie publishing community. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much.
I would love to know how and why you started in publishing. What was calling you?
To start in publishing, that's a really interesting question. For as long as I can remember, I have just been in love with words and the power of words. A really good example that I can think of when I was a child, I loved Shel Silverstein, and I had a particularly free-spirited teacher who, she was great. She had us, we had a half-hour music time every day, and rather than playing, typical kids' music songs, she would play the Beatles and, all that popular music from the 60s and 70s, and the Monkees were my favorite band when I was 7 years old, rather than Mariah Carey and all those other ones. But anyway, this teacher also had us memorize a poem every single week. And the first poem that I memorized was a poem called Magic by Shel Silverstein. And the last line in the poem is, "And all the magic I have known I've had to make myself." And that really stuck with me, and it's really one of the first examples that I can think of the power of words and how that resonated with me, because it's really been kind of the driving, those have been the driving words for my life. I've realized from that young age, I realized that anything that I did, I would have to do myself. So the power of words really just speaks to me, and I really feel like my purpose in life is to help people make their words as powerful as possible. And I think I saw that in my own life at that time, and it's something that has always been inside of me. And so, when I was a child, my my punishment before I went to bed was to bed with no books. That's how I got in trouble. So, it's just been something that has been with me my whole life.
Now, were you one of those kids who wrote and journaled and had diaries or any of that? Were you always creating stories and publish? Did you have your own little newspaper and publish them, or?
I did, actually. I did. I wrote stories all the time, and I had a little family newsletter, and I wasn't real regular about it, but I would write stories about what happened to our family during the week, and I would give them to my family members. I would just, write each one and then copy it on a new page, and just kind of like an update of what happened with Sarah, what happened with Joe, what happened with Mom. And so I did do that. And I wrote my own stories too. And to be honest, I wasn't necessarily the most creative with writing my own stories, but I still loved stories, and I loved reading stories, and I loved thinking about stories. So, it's always been a passion of mine, even if it wasn't always something that I was great at doing myself.
Okay. Well, what would you say today are your strengths as far as, to go into the publishing business, you have to bring a lot of skill sets to it. So what are some of your strengths?
I think one of my major strengths is my intuitiveness with people. I really see people, and I understand where they're coming from, and I think I'm good at talking with people and hearing what's important to them and understanding where they're coming from. And I think that's hugely important with my job, because I really realize when you write a book, there's nothing closer to putting your soul out into the world than writing words and delivering it to people. So I understand that it's a really challenging and kind of terrifying thing to do.
Right.
And I also see that. So it really is. There's nothing closer to an extension of yourself, I think, than publishing your words and putting that out there. That's it's a scary thing. And I also believe that books are successful when they are coming from the heart and when they are marketed that way. When I think readers can tell when something isn't authentic. I think people can feel that because words are such an extension of yourself, and like you can tell when you meet somebody whether they're being fake or not. I think you can feel that when you read a book that's coming from not the most genuine place. And so it's really important to me that I get to the root of what an author wants to do and help them clarify that message in the best way. So I think I'm really intuitive about people. I think that's what helps me a lot.
Well, I know, for us, it was working together. And again, I'm not one who gives away easily and, entrusts in that place, which you were just talking about. So I know we had to build a relationship because it's like, oh God, I'm giving my baby to her. That is really what it is.
Yes,
these are my words. This is my baby. I am vulnerable here. I'm out there on a limb, and you have to trust that person. So yes, trust definitely is one of those things that has to be built. And as we got to know each other, there were a lot more, there was that intuitiveness and that we could start reading each other better. And you knew when I was in fear and, things like that, because fear pops up in the creative process constantly, especially as you put yourself out. And there's that, why don't you tell people a little bit about the process? Because then I can comment about what it was like. Because so many of the creative activists want to write a book. They have something to say, they have a message, and they think that's the platform to do it. And so I'd love for them to hear about that.
Absolutely. And just to comment on what you just said, how fear comes up so much in the creative process. It's true, because you're delivering a part of yourself to the world, and it is a very vulnerable place, and there is that roller coaster. And luckily I'm very familiar with that roller coaster. I've done it over 250 times now, so not with myself, but I've helped people through that process. And so yes, there are definitely emotional ups and downs, and that's just part of it. We start everything with a strategy meeting looking at what you want your book to do in the world. That's the most important piece of what we do, is investigating that question. And the answer will dictate everything that we do in the process and every decision that we make in the process. I know that you probably found that, when everything with design was really dictated by how we wanted the readers to experience the book and what we wanted the readers to do with the book, right?
Right. For me, I came in, and I don't know if I'm atypical. I sort of think I am. I came in with a vision, not just text. And so I handed you, here's a chapter. This is what I want it to look like. And then you had to give me feedback and say, okay, Ray, that really doesn't quite match what you're saying. It's a little too juvenile. And for me to hear it and accept it and change was like, wow, So, but we went back to
we went back to the answer of what you wanted the book to do in the world, and that's how we came to the decision to get a new design. Because the vision that you had didn't match what you wanted the book to do.
Right. And I totally agree. As today, we sent out, by the way, to anybody listening, it went to the printers last week. So it is the vision that we wanted, and it's beautiful. I was
beautiful.
all about, it had to have full color, it had to have spark and fun and all sorts of different pieces to it. And so it does reflect that. But it was a process for us to go through. And like I said, I don't think most people come in with an actual, here's a chapter totally the way I want it to look. So
you're absolutely right. But there are all different kinds of authors with different needs, and so that and that's what you needed in order to create. There are all kinds of creators out there, and so I think whatever you need to reach your goals, to be able to create in the way that you need to create, I think that's great. And you had such a clear understanding of your process. So I'm really glad that you came to the table with that, because even though we didn't go with that particular design, it did give me a flavor of what you were going for, and it gave me a taste of your vision, and I thought that was very important. So even though we went a different direction, it wasn't a total detour from what you originally presented.
Everything can be used again, in my mind. Whatever it is, it's a learning tool. So I totally agree. Nothing is lost in it. But I think, like you said, it's a process. And so, I'm going to stop now and let you walk people through it again. So
Sure. So we start with that strategy meeting to identify what we want the book to do in the world and who we want the book to touch and who we want it to be for. And then from there, I would align you with the appropriate editor who would help you put the manuscript in the right sequence and with the right voice and make all of those editorial decisions. And then we would bring the designer in for the same kind of thing, really, what we want the aesthetic voice to be and how we want it to feel to readers. And so it goes editing, design, proofreading, printing, ebook, and distribution. That's really the whole process in a nutshell. But through each of those stages, there are a lot of steps to go into each of those stages. And Ray and I talked on a weekly basis, probably more than once a week, throughout this process, just to identify, all of the different things that we needed to be doing every week. So there's a lot of strategy development that also goes into the publishing process, and what I hope to do differently, or what I am doing differently with publishing. And this is it's not a traditional publishing model. It's an indie publishing model, but with the quality and strategy of a traditional press. And we take it a step further with the strategy and make the strategy custom. It's not a one-size-fits-all marketing process. Every book needs to be marketed differently because every book is trying to do something else. And so that's something that we develop as we go. So it's really a big picture process. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4 step deal. And we're not just a book production company. We're really a big picture company that can bring lots of different pieces to the table.
Right, and I appreciate that, because our conversations early on were about marketing and and being fluid and allowing for changes in marketing, because it's not just a book. And that's something I really learned over the process. It's not about the book. The book to me is the calling card and the introduction to the creative activist community, because for me it's a much bigger piece. And it's not something that's going to stop just because I published my book. And so
right.
And
no, the book
and I don't know if and I know because I did self-publish my own book before, that's what it was. It was like, okay, I've done it, now what? I didn't really have the marketing strategy. I didn't have any of the other pieces behind it. I didn't have the distribution channels. That was really interesting to, I kept saying, oh my, there's so much more to this than I even knew. We just recently had a conversation about distribution. I didn't even know, about Amazon and Barnes & Noble and, all these other places, and Ingram and Taylor, and what those places, what that part of it looks like. And so Amy has been there every step of the way. She has handled making those connections for me, connecting me with Itasca distribution. And so for me, you've made the process much easier. And there are days when I say, I can't write another word, and you're there as my cheering section. So I thank you for that.
Absolutely. No, it's been just a wonderful experience working with you too. I've loved it, and I love your book and everything it stands for and how it looks. It's just beautiful. It's truly one of my favorite books that I've worked on in a while. And so I just can't wait to hold it in my hands and have it on our shelf. It's going to be great.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
Yeah, and I really do see I saw early on in talking to you that you wanted this book to be just a piece of the movement that you're creating and that you're contributing to. It's not just a book. It's not a solitary product. It's a piece of a much bigger picture, and that bigger picture, it's really a movement. It's a community. It's you've got events that are going along with it. You've got other people who are contributing, other nonprofits who are contributing, causes that you care about that are contributing. And so there are a lot of ways that this book will be touching the world, and it's not. Again, the book is just a piece of it.
Right.
So
and thank you. That is a great way to describe it, and that is important. Now, I'd like to go back and ask you a little bit more about what are some of the do's and don'ts people should be thinking about, or how to present to you, or when people are considering writing a book, what would you tell them? What should what can they do? Do you have any tips and tools?
Yes, I do have lots of tips and tools and suggestions. First of all, it really depends on what genre you're doing, but let's say that you're doing nonfiction, because most activists are doing nonfiction. That said, we do have some very purpose-driven fiction authors out there too, and children's book authors. So I'm not going to limit it to that. But first ask yourself, what do I want my book to do in the world, and who do I want to touch? And I know that sounds like a question that you probably think you know the answer to, but you might be surprised when you ask yourself exactly what you say. And then, as you're writing, try not to judge yourself, because that's my biggest challenge. I'm a perfectionist. And when I create something, I'm judging myself the whole way through, and so I sometimes can get some completion anxiety when I'm creating something, because I'll go back and I'll edit a paragraph right after I write it, and that's not probably the most productive way to do it. I know it's not. So I would say, if you can do it this way, where when you write, if you can avoid looking at what you create until you're done creating it, it's really, really hard to do, but it's the best way to get it done. And so I would suggest that. I would also suggest setting some time aside to work on your book, a standing appointment every week. Maybe you can afford an hour, maybe you can afford 2 hours, but honor that. Keep it on your calendar. Don't schedule anything else during that time. It is hard to do, and it is so easy to get lost in the day-to-day. That's another problem that I have, is that I love my clients, and I love working for my clients, so when I'm creating something, it can be hard to break away from my daily job and my daily duties to devote to my own creation. And so I would really suggest setting some time aside and really honoring that commitment that you make to yourself. Another suggestion, if you're looking to write, get an accountability partner. Get somebody that you have who is also writing or creating something that you trust, somebody who you can count on to be there for you week after week, just for a phone call even. And that way you can make goals with somebody, and if somebody else knows your goals and you feel like you're accountable to them, then you're more likely to make those goals and achieve them, because it's easy to disappoint yourself. But if you're disappointing somebody else, and if you can't be an example to that other person that you're accountable to, then it's a little harder than just disappointing yourself. So those are 3 suggestions for the writing process that I have. As far as getting your book published, I would suggest, don't look for places to cut corners. I'm not saying that that it has to be really expensive, but definitely don't hire your sister to do the cover because she took a graphic design class in college. There are certain things that need to be done professionally in order for you to receive, or in order for you to achieve the goals that you have tied to your book. The cover is one of the most important pieces in the design of the book, the aesthetic of the book, as Ray knows. And if it looks like something that isn't professionally done, you're not going to be able to get an answer when you knock on doors. And when you can't get an answer, you're not going to be able to achieve the goals that you have with your book. And so do it professionally. Try not to skimp. And that doesn't mean that it has to be. That doesn't mean you have to spend, $50,000 on publishing your book. That's not what I'm saying. But really do your homework and make sure that the people that you work with are people who have done a good job in the past.
Mhm. Well, everything you said I can relate to because, I know I kept writing my process and it got better once I put it on my calendar every day, 9 a.m., right. And I started with just 15 minutes, but then that would snowball into more, but it was getting it on the calendar, seeing it come up every morning. I do still have a coach who I am accountable to, and all those pieces, they help me to get clear, and it was really interesting. And I think too, skipping ahead, because I know people are going to ask the question, what's the difference between a traditional publisher, self-publisher, and a hybrid publisher? Or maybe it's called indie. I don't know if you call it indie or hybrid.
There are lots of different names for it. I just have to say, too, it's the most exciting time ever to be in the publishing world and to be a professional here. It's a rapidly changing industry. Every year it's different. Every 6 months it's different. And so it's fun for me to observe how it's evolving. And I'm actually really positive about it. I know a lot of people are wary of all of these changes that are happening, and they'll ask me, well, what about ebooks? Is that going to just drown your business? Well, no, I think there are more ways than ever to get your message out into the world. And I think that's exciting. My business is not about printing books. My business is about helping people deliver their messages to the world. So more outlets for that to happen is only a good thing in my mind. So, but anyway, I'll tell you the difference between the few different types of publishing. Traditional publishing is, people call them the big five, Simon & Schuster, Random House, Penguin, all of those publishers on the East Coast, they would be traditional publishers, and there are a lot of smaller traditional publishers out there as well. How you would work with one of them, you would reach out to appropriate literary agents. They all specialize in different areas, and then if you got accepted, let's say you do get accepted by a literary agent, they would shop your novel or your memoir or whatever your book is to appropriate editors at some of these places, some of these traditional publishers. If they decide to pick it up, they will give you an advance. Usually nowadays for a new author, that's between $3,000 and $5,000. Sometimes there's no advance. Sometimes it's a little more. It just depends, but the average is between $3,000 and $5,000. And then they'll take your book, they'll publish it, and they'll release it under one of their imprints that and help you market it to those specific niches that it fits under the imprints. And then once you've made your money back for your advance, once the book has sold enough to cover your advance, then you'll receive small royalties going forward of usually 8 to 12%. So it's definitely not a get-rich plan, and it is a hard way to break into publishing, but a lot of authors do better that way. It really depends. I really truly believe that every book is published or it has its own highest path, its own best way to reach audiences. It's not always indie, it's not always traditional, but every book has its own best way to reach readers.
In my mind, a traditional still would take care of the marketing. They'd make arrangements for you to get on shows or go have book signings. Is that still true?
No, that's really not true anymore. A lot of what they will do is it'll be in their catalog, obviously. They will make sure that it's in appropriate bookstores, and they probably will help you with a little bit of PR. But the days of, a multi-city book tour and press tour are pretty much over, and the reason is that there's so much content out there that it really is no longer the most cost-effective way to do it. They might also help you with a blog tour, and that's where your book is reviewed by a number of amateur bloggers that would blog about your genre. But typically they're not helping much beyond that, so the marketing piece is still usually in the hands of the author. So that's something to keep in mind. But, of course, your book will have a traditional publisher's name behind it, and you will not hopefully reach as many roadblocks in distribution as some indie authors do. Our authors do have traditional distribution, so it's not as much of a problem with our authors, but we're also not Simon & Schuster, so, that's definitely a pro with going the traditional route. So just something to keep in mind, though, that, you don't have to fund your project either with a traditional publishing deal. So there is less money to be made in the profits of the book, but you also don't have the upfront investment. Then there's the traditional vanity route, which is submitting your manuscript to one of the many self-publishers out there, like Lulu or Author House is a big one. Author House especially is traditionally looked at as predatory. They publish the majority of self-published books out there, and they are known for trying to upsell packages and that sort of thing. Their goal is, they're really a corporation, and actually traditional publishers have self-publishing legs as well, and they actually use Author House. So going the traditional route, you're not necessarily bucking the system. You're kind of, I know I'm talking negatively. I don't mean to. It's an interesting world right now in publishing. But there are a lot of independent publishers out there who have a traditional system, but are independent of the Big Five and are independent of Author House and all of those other channels. And they would function largely like Wise Inc. And kind of that would be more of a hybrid model where they would have a traditional publishing process, but they're not being funded by any major corporations. They're self-funded. And then there's indie publishing like us, where we have a traditional publishing process, but our authors are funding their books. But a lot of our authors are doing what Ray is doing, and they are getting their projects funded by PubSlush or other crowdfunding sites, and then they're funding it through us. So what happens then is they're getting really the best of both worlds, because they're getting their project funded, but then they also get all the benefits of the self-publishing and the quality control that they have and all that. So those are the major differences between the publishers. If anybody is confused about that, you can certainly let me know and I can provide more clarity. But it is an interesting world right now, for sure.
What would be, okay, I want to do one last question. So this is, okay, for somebody who's sitting there and saying, I got a message, but I'm stuck. What do I do? When you get stuck, what do you do? How do you get into that creative mode?
Oh, gosh. Well, when I have to create something, I do honor the time on my calendar to do that. And sometimes I have a really successful day and it snowballs, as you suggest. And then sometimes I have a really slow day and my mind is just not there. I read a lot of books, actually, on the creative process, and sometimes that can help me. Sometimes I just need to get up and go for a walk and start thinking about my project rather than trying to work on the project. Sometimes the work that I do during that time is brainstorming by myself. I also don't do any work at home when I'm working on this project. I tend to go to a coffee shop, or I don't even work on it at the office. Excuse me. I like to be somewhere else, somewhere outside of my typical surroundings. But if you reach roadblocks, one thing that we do suggest sometimes is hiring a developmental editor to help you with the process. So the developmental editor would be not only an accountability partner, but they would give you feedback as you go, give you assignments, and help you structure the process so that you have lots of small goals throughout the process and you don't reach roadblocks because you know exactly what you need to do next. Because the reason that some people get lost is because they might go down a rabbit hole and it might be a detour from what they were originally doing and they lose focus. And so a ghostwriter or a developmental editor would help you avoid that by keeping you on the path that you originally envisioned.
That's great. Thank you so much. Amy, how can people get a hold of you and how can they find you?
You can find, we are at wiseinkpub.com. That's WISEINKPUB.com. And we also have our blog that is really well read right now, and it's all about indie publishing and helping people publish with quality and with lots of information. That's why it's called Wise Ink. It's all about wisdom, and that's at wiseinkblog.com. WISEINKBLOG.com. So those are the best places to find me.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it. I love having this conversation. I know everybody's going to benefit from hearing you, and they're going to go home and they're going to get it on their calendar. I'm writing for 10 minutes today, so thank you.
I hope so. And, anything that I can do to help you in the process, anybody who's listening, like I said, I really believe in authors like Ray. I believe in the power of words. I want to help you achieve your goals with words. And if you're not a good fit for us, we know a lot of other great places where you could go. So view me as a resource. That's the biggest thing.
Great. Thank you so much. And this is Ray Luskin and Amy Quale. And again, I'm a creative activist. So tap into your creativity tonight. Find 5 minutes to just play, explore, experiment. Find some way to be creative in your life. And it's not about painting or drawing or writing. It could be making a new meal out of 3 ingredients tonight. So take your time and enjoy your day. This is Ray Luskin. Bye.